Hello, folks. Welcome back to the Catholic OCD Podcast. Today, we are going to talk about something big in Ohio coming up. We have to vote no on Issue 1. What is Issue 1? Why do we have to vote it down? We have AJ in the studio with us today. We're going to talk about this to let you know what's going on in Ohio. Okay, so AJ, we got this vote coming up here. Issue 1 is something that we see all these commercials going on about and all these different ads. And one says, protect women, protect the health of women, vote yes on Issue 1. And then the other one says, well, protect the health of women, protect women, vote no on Issue 1.
Yeah.
What is Issue 1?
Well, first of all, I think even if somebody's watching this in another state, this is election time, and Issue 1 is an Ohio issue, but it has to do with parent rights, abortion, all of those things, and it's basically the result of the overturning of Roe v. Wade. This is what we knew was coming. In all of the states. So if you live in a state that currently abortion is not, that it is restricted in certain ways, then you're going to have abortion activists and such coming into your state, putting this on the ballot. So even if you're not living in Ohio, there probably is something, this issue is probably on your ballot in one way. The other part of Issue 1 isn't just abortion. If you are living in Ohio, it's not just abortion, but it's also the parent right issue, because they're basically trying to say that the schools want to be able to be a higher authority than parents on things like abortion or the gender issue as well. That's the gender issue of the day, and kids, the transgender surgery for minors, things like that. This Issue 1 is important in Ohio because what they're trying to do, if you vote yes on it, basically what you're saying is that you agree with these very liberal, this liberal ideology of gender ideology, saying that parents, schools can hide it from a parent. They're not obligated to tell a parent if a child is going through a gender transition surgery, having an abortion, things like that. That's what the language is in there. I know that sometimes the language looks complex, and another friend of mine who does a podcast out of the studio, he works with the Republican Party, and so he's been dissecting some of the language, and I've seen some of the things. In fact, there was actually locally there was I don't know, John Husted from Ohio was at a local church actually breaking some of this down and talking about it. But yeah, if you're, it's an important issue, not just in Ohio, but it's also an important issue probably in a lot of states right now. So if you're listening anywhere, consider voting no, a hard no, if you're in Ohio on Issue 1. And elsewhere, if you're in another state where you've got something similar on the ballot, make sure you read your information and vote appropriately, especially if you're a Christian.
One thing that's interesting is, as a Catholic, we have the USCCB, and it's the collective, the bishops of the United States, and a lot of times you hear a lot of conservative people complain that sometimes the bishops don't just, get politically as invested as they need to. And this Issue 1 is something that is viewed as such an evil that you really see the bishops really, telling every pastor to preach against Issue 1 from the pulpit, which is not something that happens a lot of times. Like, you're actually seeing, like, I know in the bishop for the Youngstown diocese, where he's actually, having these the priests, in the church, different churches, pass out the signs, to vote no against issue 1. And so I make the argument that, like, when you see this happen, when you see the bishops unite so much, because it's not necessarily a Republican or Democrat issue. It's not a blue or red issue.
Yeah.
This is about something that's just morally wrong. One of the things that really makes me nervous about it is also it basically wants to allow abortion at any point.
Yeah.
And I think that when you look at a pro-life person and a pro-choice person, if you could see in their brain, a pro-life person, when they hear abortion, they have this image of a baby basically being born, yet having a hole drilled in its head.
Yeah.
And I feel like a pro-choice person, when they hear abortion, they think of somebody that's 4 weeks pregnant and, they just have this little thing inside them, and, before any harm is done, they're going to go have an abortion. I feel that even most people who consider themselves pro-choice, if you really describe the idea of, like, hey, here's this woman, she's 6 months pregnant, the baby can feel everything, and she just doesn't want to have it. And she's just going to go have this procedure. And here, you can watch it on this video. They're going to delimb this child before they crush his skull. I think that even most people who say they're pro-choice, I think they would be repulsed at that. And I think this really is what issue 1, though, is. It's not going to have a time limit of how far along in a pregnancy.
Yeah, and not only that, you have all the gender issues, the ideology that's behind it, and just basically, if you can just picture the most extreme leftists out there today that are doing this crazy stuff in culture, they're the ones that are behind this, and that's what they are. That's what will happen, is the first vision that you painted of the child being dismembered.
Yeah,
that's the reality. Somebody can fantasize it however they want, and I think pro-choice people may tend to do that. I know many pro-choice people, even the president at one point has made a statement about how we think abortion should be rare, legal and rare, and we think they're more rare now than it went. That's a bunch of hooey. That's not true.
It's funny because in Catholicism, a lot of people don't realize this. So in Catholicism, we have what's viewed as a state of mortal sin. So, we believe that somebody can enter into a stage of life where they have basically turned from God based on their will, and they have turned into sin, and that they have left the protective wings, let's say, of Jesus, covering them like a mother hen. Now, even in that topic, I know you and I might have a disagreement, but that's not the point. But even from a Catholic point of view, with mortal sin, if somebody goes and they turn their heart cold towards God, and they go and engage in some grave sin that they know is grave sin, and they freely go and do this. Well, that person, what they need to do in order to enter back to the communion table is they need to go to sacramental confession. This is the Catholic theology. This is where, go to the priest, the James 5, confess your sins to one another, to those presbyters. And this person can do this if they do grave sin, and they can go to confession. They go to confession. They go right after confession. They can go and take communion. Abortion is different. In Catholicism, if you have an abortion, if you perform an abortion, or you encourage somebody to have an abortion, you are excommunicated from the church.
Wow, I was not aware of that. This does
not mean that I got to go to confession.
Yeah.
This means you're out.
Yeah.
You're out, and excommunication has to involve like the bishop to actually bring somebody back into communion with the church.
Yeah.
So that's how serious abortion is. And I think that if we were an atheist, which we're not, if we were atheist, I think that there is this, this basic common morality of the golden rule: treat others as you want to be treated. And I think that there would be this understanding, even among atheists, of like, hey, how about this? When the baby can feel pain, it's too late. If the baby's kicking,
you would think,
to try to get out of the womb,
right?
It's too late. I could understand from an atheistic point of view of like, they're not having that same viewpoint of the soul being given at conception.
Yeah, but even just like a moral conscience, that's the idea. That's what kind of amazes me, is that it's just a comprehensive lack of moral conscience in our society.
Unless you did it to a dog.
Then these
people
the
would
thing
flip out.
And right, unless you did it exactly, yeah. Because as Christians, obviously, we have a theology and an ideology behind it of people are different. People are made in God's image. We value human life above all other forms of life because we are human, So, that whole idea of love your neighbor as yourself. Like, would you dismember your neighbor in the womb when he's helpless? No, you wouldn't do that, But yeah, that's the thing that gets me, is just that lack of moral conscience and not to pontificate or anything like that. I'm not being a judgmental Christian, because I realize we all are sinners, myself included. But just the fact that it not only happens, but that you have people, not just that people do it, but that people perform it. You've got doctors are educated people, and somebody doing that, even from I'm sorry, but somebody doing that, even from the perspective of a doctor, is something is lacking in their moral conscience. There's something lacking there, just from a human point of view, even aside from.
Can you imagine going home? Like, how was your day at work? Well, I crushed 5 skulls today.
Yeah.
It was great. And even when you're talking about like this idea of like, we obviously believe that the soul, like I said, the soul is given at conception.
Yeah. And that's a Christian, that goes back to the Hebrews. I mean, that goes back, you've got David in the Old Testament, before you form me in the womb. It's actually different.
Like, Islam does not view it that way. They view, like, I think they allow abortion up to so many months. But the Christian realizes that, we're created in God's image and likeness. There's something different about us. One of the things different about us is animals don't have abortions. Like, we're the only species.
That is a very good point.
That really does. But it's this idea of like, even if you're listening to this and you're an atheist, and you're like, I don't believe in the soul. I don't believe a 4-week-old in the womb has a soul. My gosh, you got to believe in the science, at least, that they can feel pain.
You could see it if you watch. There's videos of this kind of stuff, and a good friend of mine who's he's really passionate about this particular topic. He goes back. He actually served in the Vietnam War, and so he likens this issue to that, and he talks about how in that time the media was really insistent on showing you images of the war and people being blown apart and stuff like that, and justifying it by showing you, hey, this is what's happening to people. But today, you can't show on YouTube or in other places, you can't show what happens. You can't show a video of a baby, the before or after photo of it being aborted and what it's doing and how it's trying to get away from the pinchers that are trying to dismember it and things like that.
Heartbreaking.
It's heartbreaking. You can't show video because it's one of those things. I think it shows how our society has digressed. I mean, just in terms of its lack of moral compass, it's sad. It's really sad.
Even when you talk about this issue being also tied to the transgender ideology. It's funny because I see some people have these signs up promoting issue 1 and saying that the hardest decision she will ever have to make is not yours. Like her,
which is a lie. That's and that's another
your
lie.
Decision.
Yeah,
but it's funny because I don't think that the language of issue 1 really describes women. Like it describes individuals because it's, of course, very modern with the transgender movement,
right?
And it's to say like, well, who do we even know who a woman is today? So we live in a day and age where you actually can have people who would want to protect a biological male who has had the surgery. They would want to protect their right to have an abortion. I mean,
well, it's
insane.
And I don't mean to sound too biased on your show, so forgive me if I'm coming across the wrong way. I don't mean to do that, but I think you probably have a similar mindset, and probably a lot of your viewers do, that these are evil people. These people are, not only have they lost a moral compass, they may be possessed by the prince of demons, and that you can't take some of these viewpoints that people are taking today, in my opinion, and call yourself a Christian, call yourself a moral person. I mean, when you're talking about dismembering infants, just totally destroying the human body, even from a part of a gender transition or something like that, mutilating it so that it isn't the way God made it, but you're changing it just to make yourself happy on the inside. There's something wrong with us. There's something wrong with the people that are pushing this extreme leftist agenda, and it's evil. It's you can see it. You can see what it's doing to our kids. As a parent, I know you're a parent. We both have kids the same age, and it really upsets me when I look out there in culture and I think about our young people today. Because a lot of these kids, they don't know. They don't have somebody sticking up for them. You bring up the women. Women are told today, this is for your rights, and that is a comprehensive lie, because studies have shown women deal with the after effects of abortion in terms of from a moral conscience perspective. They deal with guilt after having an abortion. Decades. The statistic I heard a long time ago was 90% 10 years later still deal with guilt, and I think honestly that's probably low. And that's probably, not really expressing the fullness of what people go through. I had a 60-year-old man confess to me one time that he had a girl. He paid for his girlfriend to have an abortion 40, 50 years ago, however long ago it was, based on his age. I can't remember. But a grown man in his 60s confessed this to me. And, so obviously
some of this stuff stays dormant.
It does. And so, why aren't, if you're an abortionist, if you're somebody like, I want to challenge your thinking, and I want to encourage you to come out of that thought process, change your mind on this, because those taglines that they use just to push an agenda they are lies. They are not true. It is not pro-choice is not the pro-woman standpoint. That's not what that is. It's actually anti-woman. It's actually anti-human is what it is. It does not respect women. People today want freedom without responsibility, and you can't have that. That's really what they want. And abortion, unfortunately, for a lot of people, is just an easy way out of an uncomfortable circumstance. That's all it is.
I think that one of the things also is these people get duped into this idea that these people really have their best interests. And one of the reasons we know this isn't true is because usually these people that are so for this pro-choice and yes, a woman's right, if you were to tell them, well, you want the public schools to start teaching abstinence, a lot of these same people would flip out. So what they don't see is, why is it that these higher up powers to be if they're so concerned about a woman not having to have these pregnancies, why is it that they are against teaching abstinence? And it's the whole idea of like, they want your child's
soul
parts.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Yeah. I mean, this is something that's really disgusting. And really, look, when you said it great too. You and I are sinners. I've sinned probably worse than you've sinned. There's a difference though between this. We're creatures of habit, right?
Yeah.
We don't control ourselves. Sometimes we fall into sin. That's different than when you're actually publicly promoting this to society, encouraging other people.
Yeah. And why would a person do that? Why would a person publicly promote this? It does not serve society at all. There's a lot to be said about a culture of life that are, if you look at the freedoms that our country had and the way they were expressed when it started, totally different than this. This is totally different. This is not true freedom. It's done under the banner of freedom, but it's really not. And that's where the lie comes in, because it's not true freedom. We know that true freedom can only be found in Christ. And I think that that's historically, for the most part, where our culture has stood. But it's a slippery slope once you start going down that road of convenience, that road of selfishness. It's not long before you're completely immersed in it. And then you don't know what the truth is. Then down is up is down, and it seems like that's where we find ourselves today.
Well, you said it the best, though. Like, why? You asked this great question. Why do people do this? And I think that the beginning of Romans really explains this.
Yeah.
Why, these people who God allows them to be handed over to their own passions. And Paul says, like, why do they do this? Why do they not only do this, but they applaud other people who indulge in this sin? Well, the answer, Paul says, is because they hate God.
Yeah.
And listen, if you're listening to this and you've had an abortion, you performed an abortion, this doesn't mean that this is the end for you. This is just saying that it's time to repent, to turn to God, and He will forgive you of anything. And it's this idea of having that change of heart. So I want to thank AJ for coming on the show. This was a good topic.
Vote no on issue 1.
Vote no
if you're in Ohio. If you live in Ohio. Yeah. And if you're in another state, vote no on your issue, or vote whatever way you're supposed to vote to be pro-life and pro-family. Vote
for life.
Yeah.
All right, everybody, thanks for watching. Don't forget, go out and vote no on issue 1. Peace out and God bless.